week. They were trailing at Ole Miss 21-0 at the half. Were able to outscore Ole Miss 10-0 in the third quarter. Made it an 11-point game in the fourth quarter. Definitely still a chance for UTEP to come back, but the offense just did not show up in the red zone that game. They did not show up in the fourth quarter at all, and Bo Wallace was able to throw another touchdown pass to make sure that Ole Miss held on to that ball game. And then last week against New Mexico State, granted UTEP probably should have won 41-14. Those last two scores from New Mexico State coming on the second, third, and fourth string defense. Still were outscored 14-7 in the fourth quarter. So as we head to conference play, obviously the games aren't going to be as tough for UTEP. They are done with their BCS opponents this season. Of course, if they meet another BCS opponent, it would have to be in a bowl game. Next week, they travel to East Carolina. We'll talk about that game in a second. But real quickly, we'll go over the numbers from today. Nick Lamison, another strong performance after struggling a little bit against Oklahoma, having some drop passes as well as receiver miscommunication against the Sooners. Obviously, you got to give credit to the Sooners secondary. They did a fantastic job of holding the preseason Conference USA first-team quarterback to only 39 yards in the air, but definitely had a rebound game against Ole Miss. Threw for 213 yards last week. Was the Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week by throwing 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against New Mexico State at home. And then this week had to pass the ball a lot because of the inefficiency in the backfield with Nathan Jeffrey. You could tell he's not 100% from that groin injury, but really never could get it going today. Lamson went 22 for 39 passing for 259 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both were to Mike Edwards. But what I was really impressed with today was Zay Williams. He just didn't look comfortable in the first 2 games of the season against Oklahoma and Ole Miss. You know, he was getting tripped up a lot in the backfield. Really wasn't having any force. Really just kind of tried to run up the middle, and that was not working for him. Only got 1 carry against New Mexico State last week, but was huge for the Miners today. Had a 8-yard touchdown run to put UTEP right back in this ball game when it was 23-16 in the third quarter. Zay Williams ended up on the ground averaging 6.6 yards per carry, 8 carries for 53 yards for the true freshman. So a good, positive sign that you take away from this game from Zay Williams, who really showed today why he belongs at the Division I level. And UTEP's going to have this guy for 3.5 more years. It's going to be fun to watch this running back core. Josh Bell was huge on 3rd and 4th down conversions today. Had a couple of touchdowns last week. Only got 4 carries today, but compiled a big 11 yards on the ground. It was absolutely huge for the Miners in those short yard situations. He's no Leland Myers, but he certainly is the power back of this team. He is able to convert those short yard situations that Myers did for the Miners so often last season, and you just wish he was able to showcase it against Oklahoma and Ole Miss, because UTEP had a couple of short yard conversions that they didn't get those games that could have certainly changed the whole outcome of the game. And that's in the past now, but a good sign from Zay Williams and Josh Bell, the 2 freshmen. But Nate Jeffrey, who ran for 177 yards against Oklahoma, you're thinking, this guy, we're not going to miss Joe Banyard, Vernon Frazier, or Leland Myers, because this guy's going to carry the load. This guy's going to be huge for us. Nathan Jeffrey just was never able to get it going today. 8 carries for 9 yards. Did have a couple carries. I mean, you could still see that he's the same player that played against Oklahoma. He's pushing through for those 3-4 yards. I think Wisconsin does have a better run defense than Oklahoma does, and I think that's almost a fact that Oklahoma is definitely not as good of a run defense team as Wisconsin. Obviously, Oklahoma a better all-around team, being number 6 in the nation, but Wisconsin did a good job at stacking the box when they needed to today against Jeffrey. Jeffrey had a couple of odd plays There was one that he ran at the end of the first half or it might have been the start of the third quarter, but he got the handoff from Lamison, went to the right. It almost looked like he was going to try to pass the ball downfield to Malcolm Trail, but things kind of blew up, and he lost 8 yards on the play. Certainly didn't help his numbers, but really Nate Jeffrey wasn't in there too much today. Like I said, only 8 carries for the sophomore tailback, but you'd like to see him get back to what he was on the opening game against Oklahoma, and they're certainly going to need him when it comes to conference play action. For UTEP in the receiving corps today, Mike Edwards and Jordan Leslie, once again Lamison's top 2 targets. Edwards, 7 receptions for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that 62-yard reception late in the fourth quarter. Jordan Leslie was thrown to 5 times for 54 yards, and 18 yards was his long. Other notables, Malcolm Trail had a couple receptions for 10 yards, as well as Jim Jones. So certainly a young ball club who has a lot of potential at the receiving corps and in the backfield, but certainly need to start getting things going in the fourth quarter. The defense was able to get another interception, their second of the season, their second in their last 2 games. Drew Thomas was able to make a good pick against Wisconsin quarterback Joel Stave, as well as make a couple of big plays on third downs. A notable in the third quarter, stopping Aberderis on what would have been a first down on a crossing pattern, but it was definitely a huge play to steady the tide there. So Drew Thomas, one of the captains on this minor team, was able to come up huge for the team today on the defensive side of the ball, but it was not enough. 37 points against UTEP. That's probably going to be the largest number put up on this UTEP defense this season. Of course, unfortunately, really unfortunately, and we hope it's not too serious, Richard Spencer, who has caused and recovered the fumble from Monte Ball today, also had a couple of fumbles that he caused against the Ole Miss Rebels, and of course had an interception to start things off for UTEP against New Mexico State last week. He went down with a knee injury, and it did not look good. Had to be carted off the field. You could hear him wincing in pain. It just kind of looked like a freak play where his knee buckled as he was going down after making a tackle. We're going to have to see what kind of injury this is for UTEP. Obviously, it's going to hurt them in their secondary, and it did on Wisconsin's final drive today. Joel Stave, the redshirt freshman, first time starting, and he did a pretty good job. Only attempted to throw the ball 17 times, but did complete 12 of those and threw for 210 yards in the air. Once again, the big play just continues to hurt UTEP this season as Jared Aberderis, 6 receptions for 147 yards. That's just very inexcusable for this UTEP defense. These are all-American, fantastic wide receivers they're going against, but you still can't let the coverage hold up like that. And certainly it came back to bite them once again today. The momentum all shifted when it was the blocked extra point return for the 2 points, which made it 6-2. But I got to give some props to Steven Valadez. He was 2 for 2 on field goals and he is 3 for 4 on field goals. 3 for 5 on field goals this season. But he made a couple of long field goals today, and in some cold weather conditions, a 45-yarder and a 43-yarder. We know this kid has a strong leg. It was all about accuracy, and he looked a lot more accurate and a lot more comfortable out there today. So if Dakota Warren doesn't get his stuff figured out with the kicking game, then you shouldn't feel too bad about putting Valadez there, who showed that he has a very strong leg and can kick from 40-plus yards out. So certainly that's somewhat of a good sign for the Miners as they continue to try to get this kicking fiasco figured out as they head into conference play next week. As we look ahead to conference play next week, UTEP heads to East Carolina. East Carolina, another hostile environment, but when you go from playing at Ole Miss and at Wisconsin to East Carolina, it doesn't seem as hostile as it would if you were to jump from an empty Superdome at Tulane to East Carolina. I'm just using that as an example. But East Carolina, a team that is 2-1 on the season. They already knocked off the reigning, defending Conference USA champion Southern Miss last week at Southern Miss. Certainly an impressive victory there. Right now they're playing at North Carolina. They're down 7-3 in the second quarter. This is a team with a pretty good defense. Their quarterback Johnson and their quarterback Carden have split time this year. Johnson has completed 46 of 72 passes for 435 yards this year. Carden has 25 for 45 passing for 311 yards this year. Both of them 2 touchdowns each. The rushing attack for ECU really hasn't gotten going for Dobson or Cooper. Both those guys averaging just under 4 yards a carry. And, this offense hasn't really been too special this season for ECU. This is a game that UTEP can certainly win. ECU's 2 wins coming against Appalachian State. They lost 48-10 at South Carolina, and then at Southern Miss last week got a huge victory to start off the conference play for the Pirates of ECU. And like I said, another environment with 50,000 plus. I don't know if they'll get that 50,000 that Dowdy Ficklen Stadium fits, but certainly it's going to be another loud crowd, and UTEP, traditionally speaking, is not a good team on the road, but this is certainly a game that the Miners should win, in my opinion. It's already bad enough at a 1-3 start, but you look at it and you lost to the 3 BCS teams, and you all gave them runs for their money. You were in the game with a chance to win the game every time in the fourth quarter, and you saw it against New Mexico State. UTEP came out and just absolutely embarrassed New Mexico State in the first half. It was 27-7 at halftime. At one point, 27-0, and it was 20-0 after 1 quarter of play. So certainly, when you go from playing these fast, up-tempo offenses and defenses in Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Wisconsin, it's going to be a little bit easier as you get into the conference play. Conference USA, certainly not what it was last season. The only team that has any chance at getting ranked, I think, is UCF, but after losing to Ohio State, they kind of killed their chances. They were receiving some votes for the top 25, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen unless UCF goes undefeated the rest of the way. And honestly, there's only 2 games on that schedule that I believe UTEP is going to have or should have any trouble with. UTEP should be able to go 6-2 in conference play, at the very least. And this might be a little bit biased, but in my opinion, there's no reason why they can't go 8-0 if they do stay healthy. Of course, Richard Spencer, we're not sure what that injury is going to amount to. He's obviously a huge part of the UTEP defense, but even without Spencer, this is a team that should be able to get to the 6-6 mark at the very least and get to a bowl game. Of course, 1-3 right now. They've got to win 5 of their next 8 games, but that's certainly possible. Like I said, Conference USA, not what it was last year. You have East Carolina. They lost their quarterback Dixon from last year. Southern Miss lost their very talented offensive line to give Zach Line that push. Zach Line has not been the same running back so far this season, and they also lost their quarterback J.J. McDermott. They do bring in Garrett Gilbert, the Texas transfer, but he did not look good against Baylor or Texas A&M. The 2 of the first 3 games that SMU has played, their only win coming against Stephen F. Austin, a 52-0 win, but that's a Division I AA school, an FCS school. Then you go to Tulsa. Tulsa, the team that was favored to win, or was the favorite to win the Conference USA West this year. They lost their first game at Iowa.